show you guys. So this morning was actually literally the first time we'd ever shown SQL notebooks in public. So this is fantastic, and we're all super excited about it. So we have literally this was the hello world of notebooks. So hello world. So first off, for those of you who aren't familiar with notebooks, and I'm really excited that a number of you are familiar with it, let's just quickly go through the concepts of what is it really this whole notebook thing is all about. So in notebooks, that we have this thing called a kernel, which is a combination of the language, programming language that you're going to use, in addition to the execution environment. So the execution environment can be a local host, or it can be a remote one, such as Spark. So for this example, we're talking to SQL, and so we're using T-SQL in this case, and we're targeting a SQL server. So the attached to, which is on the toolbar here, basically you can think of that for SQL as what am I connected to? Here's the connection. So here we're just talking to a server that's local. Finally, or in addition, we have these things called cells. And so what is a cell in a notebook? A cell is either a, oh, sorry, a little bigger. Is that good? Okay.
Is that the right size for everybody?
Yeah, can you guys see that?
Okay, good.
Okay. So a cell. So notebooks have two types of cells. We have text cells, which are marked down, and then we have code cells. So in this case, the code that you're writing is dependent on the kernel. So in this case, it's SQL. So here's an example of a very simple SQL code cell. In addition, I can add a markdown cell anywhere I want in the notebook. And so as you'll see, whenever I'm writing something here in Markdown, we have a live Markdown preview, which is, I think, really cool. And so you have all the Markdown capabilities here. So it's not just, oh, let's create a list, let's go make something bold, let's do something like this. We also have snippet support, just like in the query editor. So here, Vicky kindly set this up for us. We can have an animated GIF. So I love that. I think it's great. But okay, so we have these things called cells. We have these code cells, text cells. We have a couple of things for kernel and attached to. What do you actually do with this? And so when you run a code cell, you'll see the results just below the cell. So if we scroll back up before this, you'll see that we have a table in this case, and then we'll have some of the messages that you're used to when you're using SQL. So if we scroll past the guy for one last time, so the results are right there, and they're actually serialized. So they're saved when you save the notebook. So if you open up the notebook in another viewer or in our viewer, you're actually going to see the results right there. So this is an advantage over just the query editor where you say, hey, I just want to share a SQL file, and then you share it with your coworker, your friend, your mom, you know, whatever. But in this case, you kind of have a historical record of exactly what the results were of various queries at that specific time, which is pretty awesome. Finally, the last thing that's actually on the toolbar as well is this concept of trust. And so by default, when you create a new notebook or you open an existing notebook, see how it says not trusted up here? What that means is that we're going to sanitize the HTML that may exist in a notebook, and we just disable JavaScript so that whenever you just open a notebook, you know, your machine's not going to go haywire with, you know, some malicious code. That's basically all that means. Okay, any questions so far? Is that okay? Okay, cool. Okay, so even though this concept of notebooks might be new in Azure Data Studio, and for SQL, people who are really used to the SQL tools, we have a familiar editing experience. So here in a code cell, notice how we have syntax highlighting. We also have IntelliSense support. So let's see. If I do this, notice how we have connected support, and we can We'll literally just query the server for various objects. And then we have snippets as well. And so using the, let's see, what is it? VH, where? So basically everything that you're used to in the query editor itself is just going to show up here in notebooks, which is pretty fantastic. Finally, just in terms of editing, you can edit a cell or you can create a new cell either by clicking the code plus text here at the top, which is going to append cells to the end of your document, or when you're in the context of a cell, you can either add cells before or after using these context menus. Okay, we're good? Good still? Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit about how code separation really works and what it means to have code that's in one cell and what that means for subsequent cells as well. So right now, you can essentially assume that between cells that there is a go statement in between each one. So basically, each cell is its own batch. So right now, we have an example here that shows what is possible and what our current limitations are. So we have a set statement here with no count on. We're using a specific database, we're loading importers, and notice how we're declaring a variable here and just doing a very simple query. So I'll run this. It executed fantastically. We got a very simple result. Now, if you declare a variable in one cell and you try to use it in a subsequent cell, our current implementation essentially means that you can't actually read the variable that you declared in a previous cell in a subsequent cell. So this is something that we know our customers really want, and it's on our backlog, and we're going to get to it. It's just something that we don't have quite yet. So here, when I try to access that same variable that I declared previously, it doesn't actually work because it says, oh, it can't find this variable. So finally, if we redeclare I, well, we haven't set it to anything, so notice that the value of I will be null here in a subsequent one. So we're good there? Okay. Okay, so what this means is that code cell execution does matter, because notice, even though the variables didn't persist, the set and the use statements did persist, because we actually use the same connection for every single cell. Okay. So, for those of you who use R and Java support in SQL Server, which was introduced a couple of releases ago now, I think, there's an SP that I can never remember the name of, and for how you actually, okay, I have to go and Google it every time or Bing it or whatever, so it really just drives me crazy because I actually have to do this pretty often. We in notebooks actually have the ability to declare different languages in cells that are different from whatever the kernel is. So what this means is that for a particular cell, you can say this cell is Python, and behind the covers, what we're going to do is that in this case, we're going to call that SP, that stored proc, under the covers with whatever you've put underneath that %% lang Python thing. So here, if we run this, oh, okay. Anyway, so this will take just a few seconds to run, but I promise it does do the right thing. Fantastic. So you'll see hello world there. Okay. So we've gone through a number of things so far. So what do you actually use these things for? Why do people care about notebooks, really? Well, here are a couple things that we've come up with ourselves, but we really think that the wider community is going to come up with some things that we've never thought of in a million years. But here's what we've come up with, just a little sampling. So first off, a notebook can be used for a teaching tool. I mean, look what we're doing right now. We're literally using a notebook to teach about notebooks, which we think is pretty awesome. For business reporting and presentations, we actually use notebooks internally to talk about our weekly status when we're talking to management right now. In addition, we can have notebooks for troubleshooting, for deployments, and other things like that.